Good afternoon, everyone. So, this afternoon we will talk about policy making. So, base medyo saba kay nagyoy manok and of course medyo ulan, but still just focus sa discussion. So, back to the topic, let's talk about policy making. So, when we talk about policy, mo ni siya ang ato ang ginatawag as guidelines or ato ang guide in conducting something or doing something, no? Kumbaga mura siya balaod or dili gid siya mura. This is law sa ibang sa ibang term, a guide, a law, or sa ibang term. So this afternoon we will talk about how a policy is made, unsa ang process, no? So before siya maging policy, unsa ang iyahang proseso. So this is the flow chart kung unsa ang or paano mabuo ang isa ka policy. Number 1, the problem identification. When we say problem identification, gina-identify nato kung unsa ang naga-cause o hindrance sa ato para makabot nato ang ato ang vision, ato ang mission ug atong goal. So di ba, ang isa ka agency na siya gitawag na mission, kung unsa iyahang mission as an agency, unsa iyahang goal ug unsa iyahang vision. So nay mga problems nga mag-exist while naga-operate siya. So in policy making, first step is the problem identification. Paano ta makabuhat og guidelines or policy kung wala ta kabalo kung unsa ang problema or if that thing causes a problem, di ba? So number 1 is problem identification. The number 2 is policy formulation. When we say policy formulation, ang pagbuhat na sa policy. Next is policy adoption. When we say policy adoption, di ba, pag naisa ka butang, for example, nakay bagong gamit, or for example, bagong balhin sa isa ka lugar, di ba? So karaang imuhang pagbalhin dira, dili ka basta-basta maka-adjust, dili ka basta-basta kumbaga tungod kay nabaguhan ka. So you are still adapting to it, to that place. The same with policy. So before gyud na siya nga masanay ang mga tao about ana nga policy, di ba? So we have this adoption process, no? Napagyoy time para mag-adapt ang tao dito sa bagong policy, or in other term, ato nang gamiton ang haring bagong policies. And of course, kumbaga mag-adjust ta anam-anam sa bagong policy. Like for example, before nag-start ang COVID-19, we are free na may curfew pero dili ingato ka lalaas now. So kalit lang nagabot ang COVID-19, nag-implement og lockdown. So we are still adapting, we are still adjusting to it. So time comes, naka-adapt ta sa policies. So naging normal na lang siya karon. Okay? Then number 4, after the adoption, no, is the implementation. When we say implementation, ato nang gi-implement ang bagong policies. Okay? So for example, later na lang. So for example, the policies about karing ginatawag na to, no face mask, no entry policy, no? So Upon the implementation, mag-impose ta og penalties sa tanan violators. So later i-summarize nato ni siya. Then the last phase is the evaluation, policy evaluation. So what is the purpose of policy evaluation? So evaluation, ginakandak nato ang evaluation to see the progress kung unsa man natong ginakandak. Like for example, nag-implement ang government og lockdowns. Unsa ang naging outcome? Unsa kinilabasan sa lockdowns? Sunday lockdown. So naglasen ang karing COVID-19 cases. Bubble lockdown sa NCR. So unsa ang naging outcome? So gina-evaluate nato in order for us to know or to see nabay changes sa dating state sa atong environment or sa atong agency, sa atong functioning sa atong agency after the implementation, before and after the implementation of new policies. So nga na siya. So in summarize, for example, di ba, in South Cotabato or in Jensan, butang na nato in Jensan. So in Jensan, our topic is policy formulation, but we will cite is the current events para mas makarelate ang tanan. Okay, for example in Jensan, problem identification, nagataas ang cases sa COVID-19. Policy formulation, so na-identify na ang problem, naga-increase ang COVID-19 cases sa Jensan. Policy formulation, nag-formulate og policy ang LGU together with IATF. Policy adoption, okay, policy adoption, nag-adapt na ta or ginagamit na or adapt na nato ang bagong policies. Another term for policy adoption is kumbaga gi-accept nato, giagrihan nato ang bagong policies maliban sa nag-adapta, no, giagrihan og ato ang gisang-ayunan ng bagong policies. Then next, policy implementation. So tungod sa increase sa COVID-19 cases, nagbuhat og bagong policies, formulation of policies nga magkaroon og Sunday lockdown, magkaroon og curfew, limited, serado ang schools, limited ang makadto sa wakes sa mga haya, and many more. Then we adopt the policy, ni agrita, gisang ayunan nato, nag-go ta with that kumbaga policy. Then we implement the policies. We implement the bagong policies. So bawal na maglaroy-laroy from 12 PM to 4 PM. So bawal na. Every Sunday lockdown. Walay dapat makita sa gawas. Bawal ang gatherings. Sarado ang schools. So nga na, we implement the policy. Then of course, we do evaluation. Unsa man ang evaluation? Evaluation ba dito sa through datas, no, dira man gyud ta sa data. Nag-increase ba or nagbaba ang COVID-19 cases? Pila ka bok ang violators? So kinahanglan ba hugtan ang penalty sa violators or sa violation nga policy, or dili na? So we do a lot of evaluation. Pag makita nato nga daghan gud og violators, then we impose higher penalty. So nga na siya. Okay? So setting the agenda. The most important decision is to decide what to make policy about. So, the most important decision para unsa man gyud ang policy nga buhaton. So para unsa, because we have this problem nga naga-cause or naga-block sa progress sa agency or sa karing sa government, sa isa ka organization. So nga na. So para unsa ang policy. So that's why first we identify the problem para kabalot ta about unsa ang atong buhaton nga policy. Shared beliefs determine what is legitimate for the government to do. Think taxes, environmental control, etc. Legitimacy determined by number 1, shared political values, custom and tradition, impacts of events, changes in views of political elites. So, what do we mean by legitimate? It is the conforming the law. No, when we say legitimate, naga-conform siya sa balaod. So, for example, about the government to do, think taxes. Dapat ba siya mag-impose og higher tax? Or katong train law, ipatupad ba to siya? Nga na ba? Environmental control? Or etc. So, kumbaga, in short, when we formulate policies, we should always think about the legitimacy of that kumbaga the legitimacy of the policy. Is it conforming the law? No? So unsa to ang mga basis? The shared political values, the custom and tradition, dili ba siya against the custom and tradition of the majority? No? Impacts of events, is it kumbaga ma-relate ba nato siya sa current events? Because pag dili siya ma-relate to the current events, for sure karang nga policy is dili na maging effective. No? So for example, COVID-19 karon. Tapos wala may terrorist attack or any mag-declare og martial law ang president. So, di ba? That is not relevant to the current events. So, dapat dito lang ta magtuyok-tuyok sa COVID-19 unless if naay terrorist attacks or any nga panggugulo from any terrorist. Then number 4 is changes in views of political elites. Legitimacy. Scope of what government does in getting larger compared to early 20th century. Views on scope of government, power change with events. So, the policies also depends on the again, the changes or events. Like for example, war, depression, terrorism, gas prices. Pag mag-increase ang gas, ang karing mga oils, mag-increase ang iyang price pinakalit. We do policies para mag-regulate ana kay maging abuso na siya dito sa consumers, no? Terrorism. Pag na-act of terrorism, we imposed policy o martial law in Mindanao kay naay attacks of terrorism. And of course, depression. Pag lala na gani or rampant ang problem about depression, no, we create policies or laws nga kumbaga dili man maingon nga bawal ma-depress. Okay? RA 2222, also known as an act prohibiting stress and depression. So dili man na pwede, no? mag-create og policies para magbuhat og mga core groups or any groups nga mag-respond dito sa problem when it comes to depression, to lessen the rate of depression sa isa ka area, no? Dili kay karang policies nga masamot nun taga stress ka depress. Okay, then the war. So unsa man ang unsa ang isa sa naging result aning war? Policies. So tungod sa war na form ang United Nations, na form ang ASEAN, no? So na form ang different unions para iwasan ang war. So unsa man ang siya nga purpose, for business ba, for economic, political, or any, basta naa sila'y common problem nga nakita, that's why they create policies. Okay? Tapos na ba to? Government also increases its agenda when the public at large is not demanding it, and there hasn't been a major event. This is usually due to influence from groups lobbying the government for change policies. Okay? Government, when we say government, dili lang ni government sa tibok nasod. When we say government, sa ato ang sa ato ang school na ay government, sa other agencies na ay government, no? Dili ta moingon nga government gobyerno lang gyud sa Pilipinas, national government, no. Nagatukoy pod siya sa the government sa ibang organizations, no? Government also increases its agenda when the public at large is not demanding it. Kumbaga, ang ginapoint dire is the government views for example kara bitong before the COVID-19, tong pag-start pa lang sa COVID-19, no, wala man nag-demand ang tao og lockdown. The people at large hates lockdown. Wala jud ta nag-demand og lockdown. Majority wala gyud nag-demand og lockdown, but the government did it for common good, no? Gibuhat na siya sa government para i-prevent ang pagkatag sa COVID-19. So even wala siya gi-demand sa majority or sa the public, kung na-cite yun nato na siya as threat or maging problem in the future, we should take actions. We create policies in advance. So nga na siya. So this is usually due to influence from groups lobbying the government for change policies. So kinsa man ang nagdemand og lockdown? The IATF. Kinsa man ang nag-state nga itanggalon ang lockdown? The business sectors, no? Kay para makaano na ilang negosyo, makabalik og operate ilang negosyo. So nga na siya. Who influences policy? Groups. This can be corporations or unions of unrecognized groups. This, kinsa daw maka-influensya sa isa ka policy. So, for example, when we say influence, for example is karing na mga nag-protest about the martial law in Mindanao. So kara sila nga groups, they might affect the implementation of the policy about the martial law in Mindanao. Balik ta sa current events, there are groups, for example, groups of businessmen, the business sectors, magdemand sila or mag petition sila to stop lockdown, no? They affect policies, the implementation of policies, no? A group, another, kinsa ba ang maka-form og policy? Still, it is a group of people. Okay? Concept, relative deprivation, when people think they should be better off than they are. This leads to call for change in some way. So, di ba? Relative deprivation. Feeling nila they are deprived. They are, for example, gipasarado ang mga businesses kay nagka-cause og spreading sa COVID-19. They feel they are deprived to run their business. That's why they calls for change in some way. Mo follow lagi mi sa protocols. Ipa-open lang gyud among business. Di ba? Next, institutions. Isa sa pinakadako og impact or pinakadakog effect or influence ito sa policy. Institutions. Courts, bureaucracy, the Senate. So, sila tatlo. Courts can make decisions that force the other branches to act because they set off a chain reaction. They have, therefore, become vehicles for advocates for unpopular groups' causes. Okay? Groups or causes. Korte. Isa ang korte sa may pinakadako nga influence when it comes to policy. For example, the policy of data privacy sa hospitals or any sa banks, data privacy. Pero pag korte ang magsugo to divulge those information, wala gyoy epekto ang karing policy, no? The karing privacy thing, wala siya epekto because sa sugo sa korte, no? Especially if you are defending something, wala lagi may nagkamali, tama jud among pakita ka og data, pakita ka informations, so i-divulge nimo ang informations. So that is through the order of the court. So isa si korte sa may pinakadakong influence about policy. Next, bureaucracy. Thinks of problems for the government to solve rather than to react to public. Bureaucracy. Senate. What was once a slow place of debate has now morphed into a policy-making machine. Diba? So, si Senate ang isa sa naga-form og laws maliban sa House of Representatives or the congressmans. Isa ang Senate sa naga-formulate og laws. Media can put new things on the agenda or to get other groups. Isa si media sa may pinakadakong influence diri sa policy. Now, because media is powerful. So that's it. Pag ingon nga dili sila gusto sa martial law. So they tend to destroy the image of the implementation of that policy. Ang nahitabo sa Mindanao bisag di man tinuod. So gipagawa sa media. So media also has the great influence when it comes to policy. Okay, making a decision. Once you decided what policy is about, then you have to make decisions about it. Kung kabalo na ka about unsa ang policy, no? Unsa ang problema dapat aksyonan, then we make a move. We create decisions about it. Unsa atong i-include dito sa ipagbawal o i-impose nga actions. So nga na, in order to do this, the government considers the cost and benefit of such decision. So, cost is the burden, monetary or not. When we say cost, dili siya permente kwarta, but also includes efforts, power. So, nga na siya. Kumbaga, cost benefit, pila ato ang magasto or pila imuhang gastuon kung is it financial og pila ka buok ang makabenepisyo. For example, makagasto ka og millions para lang sa CR nga upat ka kubeta, upat ka bowl nga walay dingding, walay division. Tapos pila ka millions imong gigasto, imong gastuon. Then magasto kag dako kay nga amount, then gamay lang ang makabenepisyo compared sa million imong igasto, then ipabuhat nimo og kalsada sa bukid-bukid nga area, which is daghan og makabenefits. Farmers ba, local residents. So nga na, the cost benefit. So isa sa atong gina-consider diri, pila atong magasto og pila or unsa kadaghan ang makabenepisyo sa tuang kumbaga i-impose, no? So benefit is dissatisfaction, monetary or not, people enjoy it if it is adapted. So dili naman sa policy making, when we say cost, again, is it monetary or not? Even effort is also can be considered as isa sa mga cost. And the benefit is how people kumbaga paano siya na-enjoy or paano siya napakinabangan sa people. So that is the benefit. Basig daghan kayo ka daw kay mong effort pero dili kay siya useful for the people, for the beneficiaries. Or daw kay kagasto, then dili kayo siya useful. So nga na, is it here? It is here that most politicking is done sa gid ni siya, sa decision making gid ang the politics, ang pamumulitika diri gid sa decision making. Perceptions of cost and benefits change over time. Okay? Cost and benefit. Most people want the government to give a lot without them having to pay for it. Tinuod man, gusto sa tao nga na sila'y makuha without paying for it. So, how or paano? For example, karing magdemand sila og ayuda. Though yes, moingon ta nga nagabayad man tag tax. No, nagabayad man mig tax. Pero kung mo buhi ba og amount ang government, kung mo buhi siya dayon, mabalik ba dayon ang kwarta sa government through tax? No? Ipasa ang 10,000 ayuda. So yes, makatabang is that is helpful. Makatabang siya. But the question is, daghan bag makabenepisyo? Maging fair ba siya? Imagine if i-allow na siya, bawat isa makadaot og 10,000, pobre na ganitong gobyerno, no? So that is atong ginatawag nga policy, the cost benefit, no? Daghang gyud tawo ga demand to the government nga makabenepisyo sila for something, pero wala man ta ga bayad about ana, or wala man tay ginahimo nga effort para ana. So nga na siya. Politicians therefore have a huge incentives to offer programs that benefit people for which they have little cost. So there are things nga ato ang ginabuhat nga dako siya og benefit pero gamay lang ato ang gasto, gamay lang atong effort nga ma-produce. So that is when it comes to the benefit na part. Okay, widely distributed cost taxes, widely distributed benefit social security. So isa gyud ang social security sa pinaka most beneficial sa Pilipino. Like for example, insurances. Tingnan na. Narrowly distributed cost factory expenditures to reduce pollution, restriction of freedom of speech of a dissident group. Narrowly distributed benefits subsidies to farmers. Okay? Next. Majoritarian politics. Distributed benefits and distributed costs. Example, Social Security, defending nation against an attack. So, Social Security, nowadays, Department of National Defense naman ang nakatoka ani for any attacks from other nation. So, Social Security, but still that is under the Social Security yapon. Then, Social Security, the insurances, no? So, nga na siya. Majoritarian politics involved appealing to large blocks of voters to find a majority. Interest groups not important in majoritarian politics because citizens don't have incentives to join the group. So, medyo layo na siya. Okay, so ato lang siyang i-skip ang iba kaya medyo layo na siya sa tuang topic. Okay, so I think mo na siya tanan, then the rest kay medyo layo na gid siya to the main topic. So when we say policy making process, so natay ginatawag nga problem identification, then formulation of policy, the adoption of policy. So balikan nato mo ni siya the process. So on the next meetings for finals, last nogma, I will give you a guide, guide questions para maka ano taog policy making, kumbaga maka-create taog policy making. Maka-create, maka-practice ta buhat og policy making. Okay? So kari nga process atong gamiton, but still maghatag pa kog iban nga kumbaga mas pino or mas specific na process. Okay? So good afternoon everyone. So ano lang nato, skip na nato ang iban nga slides because di na siya related dito sa topic. It is more on ano na, the government mismo, no? Okay, so good afternoon.